right, welcome. We're going to get started with our workshop here, May 17th, 2022. We're going to call a quorum of 7 members present. And item C, public comment, hearing as citizens. I have one card. Any others, Ms. Horn? Just this? Okay. Let me read that real quick. During this time, public comments are welcome. The Open Meetings Act prevents us from responding to speakers regarding items not on the agenda. Comments related to items on the agenda may be discussed during deliberations on that specific agenda item. Please complete the note card and give it to the executive assistant. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Those needing an interpreter may have up to 6 minutes. Each person has one opportunity at the microphone regardless of minutes used. Unused minutes may not be accrued by another speaker. The executive assistant will time the comments and alert the president when time has expired. The board asks that those addressing the board refrain from derogatory comments. And our first speaker is Misty Carter.
Let me see if the microphone's on. Oh, there it is. There you go.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you guys. My name is Misty Carter. I graduated from A&M Consolidated in '95. My parents are Donna and Rick Hill, longtime educators here at College Station ISD. My sons are currently in 7th and 8th grade at AMCMLS and A&M Consolidated, respectively. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the proposed GPA changes. I carefully watched the April 19th board meeting, and I've talked with Tiffany Parkerson. Thank you for her time. Also with Kimberly McAdams, one of the board members, and with Chrissy Hester. So I appreciate their time and attention to this matter. I just wanted to highlight a few things that my understanding have been revised after our conversations and ensure that those are in the proposed policy that you guys are considering tonight. First is that only the weighted GPA would go on the transcripts and that the unweighted cumulative GPA will not be present on the transcripts, which my understanding is the current policy how we do it today. Second, I just wanted to ensure that when we're talking about unweighted courses, that those courses are all on the 5.0 scale. My understanding is the only items that are going into our tiered system would be math, science, social studies, English, and in language other than English or foreign language, maybe computer science is included. So I wanted to just make y'all aware of that and confirm that that is the case. So things that there would be no more advanced or honors for anything that's not in that weighted GPA. And finally, my most immediate concern that was addressed was the 7th grade class has been taking high school level courses that are not in the core. So keyboarding, principles of law, etc. And my understanding is those will continue to be treated as courses that are excluded from the GPA, yet still printed on the transcript. So I have a handout that I will hand you in a moment just to confirm that's what it looks like. I think that is the current understanding, that would continue. If you do opt into a core course, that will go on your GPA, such as Spanish, math, Algebra 1, and geometry. So beyond these 2 revisions, I just wanted to voice a concern that I shared with many parents of 7th graders that have made choices regarding math and foreign language so far. There are fewer AP courses that will be available for those students because of prerequisites and how far they've already how far they have moved through the curriculum so far. So a student who would start at Spanish 4 as a dual language student as a freshman, a student who did not do dual language wouldn't have that same opportunity. So I encourage you to think about the AP offerings that are available in that Tier 1 6.0 scale and what would be available to our 7th grade students that are already rising 8th graders that would have to be under the new system. So that's something that is a concern of many parents, that's a problem. So again, I appreciate the time and energy of the committee that worked on this, the individuals I've spoken to, and I would encourage you to only approve the proposal if it takes into account the 7th grade like we talked about, only including those opt-in courses in the weighted GPA and not including the others. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's going to bring us to item D1, consideration and discussion regarding the work of the Academic Achievement and Class Rank Committee relating to board policy, EIC local. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Horak and board members. This update, once again, we've been doing this for some time. We have Ms. Tiffany Parkerson, our Executive Director of Secondary Ed, to give us an overview. And just a reminder, this is a recommended action item at the regular meeting at 7 o'clock this evening. So with overview and preparation of the meeting later this evening, Ms. Parkerson.
Good evening. I'm here once again to share the committee's work regarding policy EIC local, which is our academic achievement and class rank committee. So just a quick overview. Once again, I'll share the committee's process, the summary of the consensus and draft policy language, as well as a couple of reminders about the recommendations from the TASB policy consultant, as well as our implementation timeline. And I've also added some points of clarification regarding the administrative procedures related to this in light of some of the questions that we have received. So I'll jump right in. As y'all are aware, the committee's purpose was to examine CSISD board policy EIC local and determine whether any changes needed to be recommended or were desired to be recommended by that committee. And at this point, as you are aware, the committee has put forward some revisions. Any changes would be implemented for an incoming freshman class and no current high school students would be impacted. These were the parameters set with that charter way back in our conversations in August and September. The committee, among many other items, reviewed policy EIC local very thoroughly, reviewed our current Tier 1 or 5.0 weighted courses in our current offerings to make sure we had an understanding of how our policy impacted the course catalog and so forth. We also examined 20 different comparison school districts in those local policies and quickly determined how unique each of those policies are, and then reached consensus on recommendations that we have brought forth to you as well. So just another reminder, we began this work in September. The committee worked very diligently and thoroughly throughout that process, and I shared this timeline with you all last month as well. So just before we delve back in and look at those proposed revisions one more time, a couple of reminders about GPA. GPA is used to measure academic achievement by illustrating the level or of rigor or difficulty of courses, such as weighted versus unweighted courses, Tier 1 courses versus Tier 2 courses, and so forth. It's also how we contextualize individual student performance by comparing them to one another in the graduating class, and that becomes the class rank. Primarily, this is used for college admissions purposes, scholarships, and then, of course, we get to set our own local parameters on how we honor students for academic success at graduation. So the committee has not recommended any changes to that first section to consistent application for graduating class because, of course, all the students in one cohort should be compared to one another with the same standard. However, they did recommend that these changes be implemented with the current 7th grade class, which is the class of 2027. In the section on calculation, the consensus is that for the weighted GPA, which is what our policy is about, is that we will include up to 8 semesters of English, math, social studies, and science. Those are the 4 core classes, and up to 2 semesters of languages other than English. For class rank GPA, this calculation would include eligible courses regardless of when taken, and includes high school core and languages other than English courses taken in middle school. Thank you, Mr. Horak. It's a sign I have too many words on a slide if you have to move. So that's the overview. I think that it's important to note that our policy EIC local sets those parameters on how we determine our GPA and how we rank students one against another. And so the committee's recommendation is that the policy include these items, is how we calculate that. In addition, the committee is recommending that grades in the following categories be included for eligible high school courses. Once again, the only eligible high school courses that we're talking about are those 4 core and languages other than English courses. These would be courses, credits earned through summer school, credit by examination, correspondence courses, and distance learning. And then you've had an opportunity to take a look at the draft language, but I featured it here once again. And you also have a copy on the table before you if you need to take another look at it. In the section on weighted grading system, I believe the new policy language starts around page 6 if you're looking for it. And it's, okay. In the area on the weighted grading system, the committee recommends a 3-tiered system. Tier 1, the highest tier, the 6.0 courses being advanced placement. Tier 2 being other locally designated advanced courses and academic dual credit. And for clarity, when we talk about dual credit, we're talking about classes that are high school credit and college credit courses, such as Blend 1301, dual credit English, for example. And then tier 3 is all other courses that are eligible. So this is how that is represented in the draft policy language as well. And then within the draft policy, you also have the complete weighted grade point average conversion chart, which shows how each of the 3 tiers is converted from a numerical grade into the weighted grading system. The last point of revision is really a continuation of past practices, but applying it to the new conversion chart, and that would be utilizing our same cut points from the numerical standpoint that we have in years past to determine academic honors for graduation, which in the new system would equate to summa cum laude, being 5.0 and above, GPAs, magna cum laude 4.8 to 4.99, and cum laude 4.5 to 4.79. Okay. And once again, you have the representation of the policy language included here. And then we do have some additional recommended language from the TASB policy consultant that is not in our current policy, and that is the information for the highest ranking graduate and the additional information about breaking a tie for the highest ranking graduate there as well. This is the information that the consultant is recommending that we go ahead and add to our current system already. So that would be applicable to the current students in high school, but it does not change the way we calculate their GPAs or ranks or graduation honors. Okay. All right, so since last we met in April, I've had some different questions and opportunities to speak to community members. And so I've added some additional information for clarity. Everything that I've gone over so far is what is in the policy itself. Okay, most of the clarification really comes around the way we implement policy, how it plays out in our administrative procedures and guidelines. So first of all, our current practice for middle school courses that are high school credits is that they are reflected on the student's high school transcript, but only advanced courses are included in the high school GPA. So for high school credit courses taking in middle school, we will continue this practice with the exception of Spanish 1, since it is now in the list of eligible courses, but it's not a weighted course. You know, at the high school level, Spanish 1 is also an unweighted course, so it's not as if you can wait for high school and get to take it with the weight. This is also in that category of languages other than English where we're doing the 2 highest semesters, and so once they get into the second year of a language other than English, they have opportunity for advanced credit and to work toward that AP credit through the different programs as well. So you have that context. So this current practice would stay the same, and I've got the courses listed to show y'all as well, so you can think through what that looks like, except for the addition of Spanish 1. All right, so when we look at those middle school courses, all of these advanced mathematics courses, as well as the advanced Spanish 2 and Spanish 3 courses that are offered at our middle schools for high school credit, were already included in the GPA. Okay. Spanish 1, once again, would be the only additional course that would be eligible and a change per this revised policy. Okay. Just a reminder, these advanced credit courses would be 5.5. Spanish 1 would be a tier 3, which would be a 5.0 course. Okay. So we also offer a plethora, thanks to the leadership of Mr. Ross, of career and technical education courses in middle school that are high school credit courses. Okay, those are listed here. You can see that touch system data entry is a local requirement, as well as cyber citizenship. These are both 0.5 credit courses or 1 semester courses. We also give students the opportunity to take ProfCom and Principles of Law and Principles of Applied Engineering in middle school. In our current practice, these courses are included on the transcript with that numerical grade, because the transcript is our academic record that shows everything a student has taken and that we've given them credit for. However, those courses are not included in the student's GPA in our current system. Since they are not eligible for inclusion in the new revised policy, they would continue to be included on the transcript with that numerical grade to show that the credit was earned. However, they will not be included in the weighted GPA, and we'll continue our current practice of not even adding them in if someone should need to request a cumulative GPA that includes something, if they need it for scholarship purposes and so forth. Okay, which kind of gets us into another point of confusion based on the questions that I've received. So once again, the policy itself really centers on how we set our parameters on GPA and class rank. When we were talking with the committee, we discussed that sometimes students do need to have a different representation of all the grades that they have taken, and it needs to be shown in a different way, because that's how a scholarship application is asking for it. And so right now, our current practice is to have, you could go ask for any of your high school kids right now, their unweighted GPA, and we can provide that upon request. And so similarly, we, as administration, based on that confusion and feedback, are going to, instead of going with the recommendation of the committee of going ahead and printing both on a transcript, to continue our current practice. And if somebody needs that, then they can go ask for it, and then that provides clarity. When we're describing GPA in our district, moving forward with the 7th graders, we're really talking about the 4 core and LOTE and how it is written in this policy.
Good, I appreciate that. I mean, I do think that was where a lot of some of the confusion was coming up. We spent so much time focusing on the weighted core GPA that we didn't necessarily go back and clarify the unweighted cumulative as much. That said, can you make sure we do all understand what is the scale going to be for the unweighted cumulative GPA? What is it gonna actually look like?
So it would be the tier 3 scale, where the 5.0 is a 100.
So it will still be it will be on a 5.0 scale?
It would still be on that tier 3 scale, yes.
And everything will be, nothing will be weighted on it, even the core things that are.
Right. And generally, whenever we've been asked for that in our current circumstances, that is what they're asking for, if they're asking for the unweighted. Let's take a look, big picture. Once again, trying to be able to compare across the very unique GPA systems across districts.
We had some discussion that maybe we should use a 100-point scale on there, but we're going to stick with the
Yes, ma'am.
the 5.0.
Yeah, we can convert it, and in fact, depending on what someone asks for on a scholarship application or so forth, the way our computer system calculates it right now, we could log in and we could give you a number, or we could give you out of the 5.0, 4.0 scale, et cetera. Okay. You're welcome.
And that difference is noted on the transcript itself, that this is on one scale and this is on another scale?
So we would only include their ranked GPA on their transcript.
Okay.
And so you would only see that on the transcript.
There are
This
just,
would be a separate document that's provided.
It would be a separate document provided if needed. And perhaps we were overzealous in making it convenient for the counseling departments, I'll be honest, because that's really where a lot of this conversation came from is, we get asked about that. It would be really great if we could put that on there. And we'll just continue our current practice and provide it when needed. Okay. All right. So then as far as our implementation timeline, this is an action item during tonight's board meeting. And then we have some draft communications prepared. I've given you a printed copy if anybody between workshop and the board meeting wants to get out your red pens and get after it. It's there for you to take a look at it and provide additional feedback if you would choose to do so. This English teacher relishes in feedback, or former English teacher, I should say. And then we will send that communication out tomorrow. Once again, families would have until June 9th to make any changes to course requests. I would foresee that really Spanish in 8th grade would be the point of conversation, potentially in the household of a current 7th grader. You know, are we ready to go ahead and take it in 7th or 8th grade, or do we want to push that back? But the other high school credit courses, since they will not be, we'll continue our current practice. I don't foresee a whole lot of changes there. However, we would allow someone to go ahead and request that change should that be their desire through June 9th, which allows us time to make sure the master schedule is good to go so that we'll have schedules ready in August. Additionally, as our current course catalog is representative or an outcropping of our current GPA policy, we will, for this class of 2027 and beyond, be working on revising their course guides to match and to clearly communicate how this policy plays into their course selection and which courses have which weight and so forth. And so we've had some additional conversations since April that I will share. We debated on whether we wanted that to be an addendum, if you will, to the current course catalog. And for clarity, we're starting fresh. This group of 7th graders will have their own. So for a little while, we'll have 2 course guidebooks running through high school as this transitions on the way up, to make sure that depending on what grade your student is in, you know exactly what courses are available and so forth and how that plays into GPA. This also, through the course of next year, we will work with our student information system to make sure that are all set, that by the end of that freshman year, when we do our first calculation, we're good to go for people to be able to see that first run of that class rank. And once again, this group of kiddos would begin in August of 2023, and we would see the first cohort of graduates in May of 2027, 5 years from now. So.
Remind me real quickly what you said about we're addressing the kids who may have already signed up for CBEs, or ones. Are there any that had already taken high school CBEs?
So there might be a handful.
A very small number. We were going to contact them directly.
Okay, and so Molly, I can say it louder so it's on the recording. That they will contact those families directly about that. The students who are signed up for this summer, once again, will have that opportunity to make a choice about whether they accept the grade and the credit or decide not to, depending on the context of what that is. And Molly, forgive me if I'm misspeaking, but if they took a high school credit before this year, that is for from a, I can't even, my acronyms are all mixed up in my head. From a CBE, that would speak to the grandfathering of, at this point, we're starting their GPA calculation as we move forward. Does that make sense? Okay. All righty. All right, are there any additional points of clarification I can provide? Mm-hmm.
So back to what you were just talking about, the CBEs, kids taking them early. I mean, that we're talking about that would just be on their transcript, because that most likely would not be one of their courses on their weighted GPA, because they would have more than 4.
So when students choose to take a credit by exam, it is generally because they are advanced academically and want to accelerate.
Right.
Therefore, yes, by the end of their high school careers, they're probably a student in the category who may have 10 semesters of science from which to choose, or 12 semesters instead. And so that CBE, which would be a tier 3 course, would not negatively impact their GPA. If anything, it opened the gateway for them to have other opportunities to take other science or math courses, since those are primarily our 2 areas where students accelerate through CBEs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
I would just say on your letter, if you could bold, underline, highlight, glow the June 9th deadline.
I can totally do that. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
I agree. I will say, I hope these people, this is pretty tiny is one day, I don't know.
When it's on the screen, you can blow
Okay,
it up.
it's on-
Yes, and I was trying to get it to print on one page. So
one
yes,
page.
ma'am, duly noted. I'll make sure it's really big and attached as well in case the graphic doesn't show up.
Got it. Yeah.
Yes.
And then my only comment,
I think he got them mixed up with his own, but we're good. Anyway,
my only other comment is I just am thankful for, again, in this last month, the folks who have spoken up and asked questions, that's part of the process, right? We wanted to get this out there and people to, work with it and try to figure out, what we may need to think about. And I also thanks to the district for, listening and making those adjustments as needed, and not really to the policy, but to the procedure part of it. And I guess the other comment, there will be more of that. People should know. I would expect there will be more. We've thought through so many things, but with any major change like this, there will be other things we find out along the way. But I know you guys will adapt and address them as necessary. So, thanks.
All right.
all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That will bring us to item 2, consideration and discussion related to the 2022-23 budget development. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Orack and board members. With an update of how we're tracking in 21-22 and with some initial projections and other variables that we take into account for the 22-23 budget is our CFO, Ms. Amy Droz.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, thank you. There we go. Sorry, just took me a second there. Can't see that far. I know the feeling. I might have to. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here again tonight to talk about some preliminary information with regard to our upcoming fiscal year budget. That's for 22-23. So just quickly what we're going to cover tonight. As always, we're going to give you an update on our current year, the general fund, and where I am anticipating that we will end up as that kind of becomes our new base. We're going to look at some preliminary information again for next year. That's updated enrollment and property values, revenue and expenditure projections, and start looking at some preliminary compensation information, that being just some core and base information that's going to be very vital as we move forward in those conversations in the coming weeks and months. Again, our overall timeline and where we're at with that. And then at the very end is historical data that we've gone over previously, just for your reference. As you're looking through this, if you need some background information, that will be there. So first of all, we've talked a lot about this current year and what they call the target percentage attendance rate. That was implemented by TEA to help districts in periods 1 through 4, particularly 1 and 4, when our attendance rates due to the pandemic were very low across the state. And College Station, we did benefit from this. So this schedule actually is updated, so we now know where period 5 is. Of course, we haven't reviewed and audited those, but should be very close. So we're only estimating period 6 at this point for our attendance percentages. So right now, I think that with this hold harmless provision, will be somewhere around 13,270 average daily attendance. And we originally budgeted last August 13,160. So we'll be 100 to 110, and my estimates better than we originally budgeted. So we're very grateful for this provision that they put in place. So looking at our revenue estimates using that hold harmless provision, so we adopted, or you adopted, 124.7 million of revenue less recapture, because I relate that directly to our property taxes and state revenue. I feel like we're going to come in at 126.4, or a little better than that. So 1.7 million above where we estimated originally. So, and remember, that does not include anything with regard to our hail and roof claims. So we did have some insurance proceeds there. And then looking forward to the expenditures, looking at the bottom line, I think we're going to come out at about 1.5 million, where appropriations exceed revenues instead of the 2.9 that we adopted. Again, then we have the winter storm damage, and those numbers are still tracking at about $1.4 million due to our deductibles, unrecoverable depreciation, and that sort. But when you take this extraordinary loss with our operating loss, it's right at the 2.9 that we originally adopted. So we'll wait and see how that ends up finally, and we'll keep updating it. So what does this do to our fund balance? Because as we've said before, part of our financial rating is looking at our fund balance and ensuring that in the undesignated or unassigned part that we have 75 days of operating expenditures or cash flow. So looking at that, you can see the last 2 years or a couple years that we have dipped into fund balance. We're very grateful that it's there. It's there for a number of reasons, and some is to get through some of these hard times. But when we get through to August 31, 2022, with the anticipated loss, both with the insurance and regular, looking at around 31.8 total. In this particular schedule, I did go ahead and move some of the committed to unassigned to meet that 75-day requirement, but that's certainly well within that time span. So, but we are inching down each year. So we'll keep a very close eye on that as we look at the next year's budget.
Amy, the 75 days is utilized in the financial integrity, the rating system, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So now moving forward to 22-23. So we did receive some updated demographic information or projections for our enrollment. So in the fall, the demographer estimated our enrollment for 22-23 to be at 14,594. So since then, our enrollment has continued to grow. That's the other thing that's helped our current year. It's continued to increase throughout the year. So he reassessed that based on the current enrollment information we gave him at the time, and now he's predicting 14,689. Our enrollment as of yesterday was 14,335. Still slightly higher than a month ago when I reported it to you. So growth is, of course, slowing down. We're at the end of the year, but we are continuing to see an increase in enrollment. So that 14,689, I like to compare it to, sorry, one too many slides, to Snapshot, because that is a constant. That's every year. TEA reports that, so it's something for us to mark, and it's not a moving target depending on where that they look at. So then we have to look at our property value growth. Now on around May 1st, we received what's called the preliminary property values from our appraisal district here locally. They go in and estimate then what they feel like might be protested by our taxpayers and their values and what we may lose. They're continuing to still find some properties that need to go on there, but 11.5% growth is very realistic based on the data that they gave us. So that's what we're going to use in our estimates. And you can see there, 2017 was the last time we had growth of this kind of magnitude. School finance was very different then, so I wasn't here, but they remind me back in 2017 when they grew like that, our recapture payments went way up.
Over 5 million. I don't know why I remember that.
I don't know why you remember that number. Now with a new law, as they grow this, our recapture payments don't increase, but our tax rate has to be compressed down. So that's
So,
the effect of that.
Amy,
growth.
regardless of the property value growth, we'll only recognize 2.5% on
Around
the revenue
2.5%.
side. And at that time, the M&O rate starts getting compressed down to limit how much revenue we recognize.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So I will remind you of that additional homestead exemption that was on the ballot. This growth does not include that additional homestead. They did not have that in their software at the time, but also by not putting it in there, it's very relative because I'm comparing to similar values for the prior year and similar rules. So that's
But
not included.
For our purposes, that 15,000 homestead exemption probably doesn't make much of a difference when it comes to revenue because we have that 2.5% cap.
It does make some differences, but we are going to be held harmless to that. So our hold harmless right now is estimated at a few $100,000, $200,000 to
Okay.
$300,000. So we do have some loss in value there, but they will hold us harmless. The state will make up that difference for school districts. So at that 11.5%, the question is how much are we going to have to compress our tax rate? So we're still waiting on finals, but the estimates TEA and the comptroller have provided previously have been very accurate. So at 11.5%, currently College Station ISD's M&O tax rate is at 95.22 cents. I'm estimating that it would go down 5.8 cents or just shy of 6, and that's only if it stays at 11.5. If it ends up a little higher, it will be a little higher than that, 5.8. So 9.41 cents. If we hold the INS, the debt rate at the 26.3, we're looking at a total tax rate of $1.1571 compared to $1.2152. So, and all of this now does include that additional homestead exemption, all of the calculations that I've made here. Questions?
I mean, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but just, putting that in bigger perspective, obviously it's, the legislature passed it so that people could have some tax relief.
Some tax
right?
relief, correct.
But we're talking about when they're limiting us to a 2.5% tax or a growth, right, really? I mean,
Basically.
that's happening in a time where, I mean, it makes me, where we can't raise our expenses more than 2.5% then, which is teacher salaries, is all the inflation things that are going on right now, right? That are much more than 2.5%.
Correct.
I just make sure I'm understanding that all correctly.
You are
right?
understanding, and it can even be further complicated by relative to our student growth. Fortunately, with this student growth, the recapture will not set in, but if we had a lower student growth compared to that, property values, then recapture could even set in. But we're fortunate to have the student growth that we do. So looking at the total tax rate over the past 5 years, you can see that we have gone down 18 cents, and that's our current rate. This does not include the almost 6 cents that I am expecting us to decline this year due to compression. So almost 18 cents in 5 years. Pretty phenomenal. So now looking at the assumptions that we used in producing the revenue and expenditures that you're going to see in a minute. We talked about that 3.5% enrollment growth based on snapshot. That's that 14,689 for enrollment. That equates to right at 13,600 for our average daily attendance. And then, of course, an even higher, what we call weighted average daily attendance. And this is for those special populations that we'd get additional weights for. And then the property tax growth of 11.5% at that. For the general fund, 89.41 cents is what we're going to utilize in the calculations next. So estimating out the revenue through the funding formulas that we have, holding our miscellaneous revenue, interest, earnings, extracurricular, and other the same Looking at state revenue, we will pick up some additional fast growth allotment that has already been calculated for the year. So that's at 686,000 compared to about 350 last year. And taking our federal programs down a little bit. Some of that is the dependence on ESSER, the indirect cost. So looking at 130.18 million. That's up from the budgeted revenue, not ended actual, of about $5.4 million. And you look at that with no recapture. Looking forward to the appropriations, our appropriations last year were 127.6 million. And we've looked at a few things that we need to add back into this budget. Some positions for special education, as that program has grown. Inflation is mainly the other areas in fuel, property and casualty, and some other contracts that we have. So really keeping those to a minimum. But when we apply that to our estimated revenue, we have about $1.3 million of revenue in excess of appropriation. So we're in a positive situation before we look at compensation of about $1.3 million. Yes.
For the special education, my understanding is that we're getting a lot of influx because people want to bring their special needs children here. And I think it says a lot about the district, but is there not any kind of federal fund or state fund or accommodation for that?
Well, first of all, that we get some of the weights for those particular students and in attendance in the services that they're provided. So that is calculated a little bit higher in our weighted average daily attendance, which is what we're funded on. We also do get federal monies. And we just got our appropriations, which really, compared to our growth, it doesn't seem like it went up very much. I think I was told it went up about 50,000. It's based on populations, I think it's of the last December. Is that correct? So we do have some federal monies as well, in addition to that is not reported here.
And yeah, I think it's great to say that that's a draw for people coming to our district. It shows a lot of the effort of the teachers and especially the SPED department.
So looking to that preliminary compensation information, so we do contract with TASB to review our salaries in comparison to our peer groups. So this is a summary of some of their findings that we got a preliminary report on. They compared our teacher groups to 11 market peer districts. In that group, they look at pay ranges of 0, 5, 10, and 15. So our 5, 10, and 15-year teacher salaries were at 91% of our peer market, and we were at 94% of that market for the 20-year. Beginning teacher pay was at 93% of market. On average, College Station ISD does have more experienced teachers than in other districts, so that's a positive. 51% of our teachers have more than 10 years of experience. And the last statistic that we have is last year, there was, out of 129 total teachers, we hired 135, of which 54 were new to the profession. So that's why that beginning teacher pay is so important.
On this report, does it take into account our growth or attrition relative to other schools that may pay, say, 95 or 96% of the market? And then correlated to that question is, does it take into account the pay versus the student-teacher ratios and the special accommodations?
No, this particular market really looks at the proximity to College Station ISD, who we might be competing with to hire the teachers. So it's proximity and district size both. They're looking at a combination of both of those.
I would say that's like Fuji apples versus Golden Delicious, because there's a lot more than just compensation for why teachers stay at a district or why people bring their children to a district. Are there reports out there that show the student ratios, the spend on special programs?
You can pull the student to teacher ratio, student to staff ratio, those types of things off your taper reports. However, they lag a year or so behind, but that information is readily available on TEA's website. What Amy is referencing here through TASB, the Texas Association of School Boards, it's simply a salary study. Okay. So it is dollars to dollars, just relative to pay. So our comparison group of 11 market peers is relative to distance, but it's also got some districts that are farther away, that are two comprehensive high school districts with similar size overall enrollment. So there's several different in there. I believe Georgetown is in there, but at the same time, I believe Magnolia, Montgomery, but then we have Bryan, Navasota, Caldwell. So there's kind of a range of folks in those peer districts, those that we would compete with locally, but also other districts that may be a little farther away that are similar size to us. We have modified that peer group. I think maybe we added Huntsville a while back or something like that, but it stayed relatively consistent. I think the message here is that just simply we're behind our peer market that we compare ourselves to. And yes, there are other variables, Mr. Decker, ratios and those types of things that one could look at. This does not take that into consideration. This is strictly teacher pay schedule.
Because I think that's the challenge we have versus the private market. As discussed with the tax rate, we can't raise our revenue. And so it's a different competitive environment. I think we need to, and y'all are doing a great job about competing, and especially as we get into the Holdsworth, about getting recruiting and retention and recognizing the excellence of the teachers. I mean, just look at the catch up from COVID. But I think it's not just a single issue. I'm not a teacher, but as an employer, it's not just salary. It's also the conditions that bring people here.
Mr. Martin, just to clarify, when it says, or Strauss, when it says pay, does that take into account other benefits, insurance, and so
No,
forth?
this is
Simply
just base pay.
salary schedule.
Just
So that's a variable. Each district may contribute a little bit differently for healthcare and those types of things.
Because answering my own question, I do know that those 100% or the ones that are over median are also districts with high attrition rates. So that should tell you something about they're trying to buy talent.
But I think, I was going to say, it's important questions to ask, though, because we all basically get the same money per student, right? I mean, a lot of changes a little bit, but so the question is, why are we at a reasonable question is, why are we at 95% of the other districts? And some of it has to be some ratios and pieces in there. Some of it is the experienced teachers, right? And that right? But I think we have to understand that as we try to catch up and try to be more on par with some of those other school districts.
Yeah, we can probably get that into more detail on the next couple times. So as far as the administrative professional area, they look at that peer group, but they also look at some statewide data for districts of similar size. So for central administration, our midpoint of our salary, our pay scale is 3% below the market. For campus administration, it's 4% below. And for other professional is 3% below. And we have listed some examples there for you of what positions are in the professional pay structure. As far as paraprofessionals, they expanded even further and looking at non-school sources and the greater Houston metro area. It's interesting enough that our pay structure, we're at 100% for the minimum and midpoints, but we're at 93% of market on average pay, which means that we have more newer employees than some of those peers that we compared to. And then for the paraprofessional and instructional support, similar, midpoint's at 100% of market, but the minimums are 94%, and we're only at 91% of market value. So what TASB is recommending is that we need to start looking at some of the starting pay for those instructional support staff within our district. And the last group is the auxiliary group, again, looking at the greater Houston area and employers other than school districts. Very good on our midpoints. We're at 99% of market. But they did recognize that in our auxiliary group, I think it's something we already know, that we need to focus on custodial, food service, and transportation. That those are some areas that school districts across the state have struggled in. But they also did recognize that in transportation that we made some considerable progress this year when you all as a board approved that mid-year recruiting and retention plan that we put into place. So we've made some gains there, not where we need to be, but we certainly have moved the needle. So going back to teacher salaries, this chart just shows where our pay is at the various levels to our peer median. Last year when we did this, of course, we were comparing what we were recommending to the prior year's salary. So this is current year to our peers. The green means that we improved in our position from the prior year. Yellow is we stayed neutral, and red is that we fell a little bit further behind than what we were last time. So I think that's just important to remember. So this is just an estimate for your information. So a 1% raise, it cost $1,128,000, about $603,000. These are estimates for the teacher groups, and then about $525,000. And as a reminder, when we did our estimates previously, we had about $1.3 million at this time available. So 1% costs the district about a little over $1.1 million. So in looking at, this is also repeat information, but I think it's worth going over one more time because as we look at compensation over the next weeks and months, so how can we generate additional budget capacity? First thing is everybody looks at is tighten our belts and reduce our expenditures. So this graph shows you that 85% is already in payroll and benefits. So to make any real headway, that's the segment of this pie chart you have to get to. And with considerable reductions that have been done previously through other legislative sessions, you can see the items that are in contracted services and supplies. These are a lot of fixed costs, particularly in contract services and required utilities, appraisal district, school resources, those type things. So, and a very smaller piece of the budget to make any reductions in. But of course, we'll always try to be efficient and look for something. The second way is to increase enrollment. Increased enrollment brings less recapture for College Station ISD, but it also brings increase in expenditures, so it's not relative. Of course, there's some economies of scale, but it does increase our expenses as well. And then the last method is a voter-approved tax ratification election or a TRE. Those are really the only thing, and I don't say they're not all generating revenue, but generating capacity to do something. So a timeline, so that's bolded, we're at May 17th. I believe we might be looking at an additional workshop, Mr. Martindale.
So I was going to check with the group. We were already tentatively penciling in the 31st for some other work, some contract approval possibly, and I was looking at the time of 4:30 on that day. However, I think this would, if we're coming together for that, already on the 31st, might be an excellent time for us to begin to roll up our sleeves and really start doing some heavy lifting in regards to the budget and compensation and where those conversations may lead us or position us for the upcoming months. So I was going to check with the group. I think the 31st is good. My question for the group is, I was originally thinking 4:30, but I'm wondering if 4 is a possibility so that we can get some budget work in here. I don't think the contract stuff will take but a few minutes. I do a reminder that at 5:30 that same day, there's several of you that are meeting with the bond committee. So we will need to be finished, probably 5:15 at the latest. So really the question for the group is 4 p.m. on the 31st, an option for a workshop. Okay, Ms. Strauss. And Amy has, she's given you just some foundational numbers. You kind of know where the starting line is now, and then anything we consider what it looks like, and how fund balance is tracking, other ways to generate capacity. So I think we need to come in our work close on the 31st and start bearing down on some things and having some conversation about how we manage compensation for 22, 23.
And to clarify my comments earlier, especially Ms. Martindale, I think the fact that we don't have the attrition some other higher paying schools have is a testament to the leadership across the administration and the campuses. But pats on the back only go so far, especially in an inflationary environment. So I think I was just trying to frame the challenge that's ahead of us is how do we recognize the teachers and their efforts,
Right.
given the zero-sum game that we
I will, Amy, will you go back a couple of slides to show the 21, 22? Keep going, please. No, there, you passed it.
That one?
I will just tell you that that bothers me. Just going to call it like it is. So I think that's where we need to start our work. Here's the wrestle with that is this information always lags a year back, right? And so when we approved compensation last year, we thought we were picking up 2 or 3 percentage points. In essence, we might have lost a percentage point or just held steady. So we'll have to kind of take that into account as we have these conversations as well, that whatever we do, there's going to be a certain percentage offset because everyone else is doing something as well, if that makes sense.
I like that word instead of revenue, since we're not a for-profit. I like the idea of capacity because it's our ability to recognize and reward people for their performance.
There's more ways than one to get there. So.
Yeah, capacity is great.
And of course, anecdotally, a lot of other school districts are increasing their teacher pay percentages quite a bit, so this upcoming year.
So come ready to work on the 31st at 4 o'clock. Any other questions for Ms. Strauss? Amy, I'd like to thank you, but I'm not sure I'm going to.
I used
No,
to have my
thank you
job,
for.
Absolutely.
All right, appreciate it. Brings us to item 3, consideration and discussion related to the 2022-23 healthcare plans and rates. Mr. Martindale.
Good deal. Another item similar to policy EIC local that's been going on for some time, here with additional detailed information related to this item is our Chief Administrative Officer, Dr. Molly Perry.
Thank you. All right, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Horak, Mr. Martindale. Last month, we had the opportunity to really talk through where we were headed with healthcare and health plans for our employees during the 22-23 year, which will officially begin on September 1 in terms of those plans. And so this evening, I'll bring you just an update to that with some more information about our next steps, including employer contributions. So as a brief reminder,
we did go through an RFP process in early spring and ultimately selected TML and TASB Health as our provider for the district beginning in 22-23. TASB Health is a non-profit risk pool governed by the Board of Trustees within the Texas Municipal League, which is a very large pool across the state. And so we feel very confident moving in this direction. As we've shared with you all, the rates and plans that we have established for our employees next year are comparable to what they are experiencing now. And so unlike the last several years, we are very pleased that we'll be able to offer those comparable plans and rates without seeing the increases that we have unfortunately been passed along from TRS. The other good news is this will be very good continuity for our employees with providers. TML is a Blue Cross Blue Shield plan, and even those folks on Scott and White will be able to keep their providers because of the wide network available within the plans. Other benefits aside from basic health care like telehealth, employee assistance will be included, and mental and physical wellness components that we received some additional information on today will be even better than what our employees have experienced, along with improved prescription benefits. So last month we saw two charts, and I just want to briefly go over those again as a reminder. There will be 4 different health plan options within the TML system. And so in the light blue, you'll see on the chart the second and fourth column, those are the TASB plans, and in white, you'll see the most comparable TRS plan along with information on the bottom in terms of current enrollment in those plans that we've used for planning and projection purposes. You'll note those first 2 columns with the copay 1500 plan, very low enrollment because that's the plan that's been closed to new enrollees for many years now through TRS. And so it's quite possible that we'll see that increase since the copay 1500 plan, which is a PPO gold standard type plan with TML, will be open to anyone. Then on the right, second half of the 2 columns, we've got the high deductible plan, which is also a PPO. It would be very comparable in terms of those deductibles, but lower out-of-pocket maximums and lower prescription, which you'll see across the board. We've seen a large number of our employees migrate to that high deductible plan over the last several years as a cost savings. While there are only 2 other plans, you'll see a duplication of the TASB 1500 here in the first 2 blue columns because it's both similar to the Active Care Primary Plan as well as the Baylor Scott and White plan. And so we've got comparisons for both of those, along with another HMO plan, the TASB Blue Essentials 2500, which does offer a higher annual deductible, so of course lower rates. Over the last month since we last spoke, we've been really crunching the numbers and spending a lot of time evaluating those employer contributions. You can see in the first of the 3 columns, that's the total monthly premium. That would be if the district was not contributing to the plan at all, which of course we are required to contribute a minimum by state law. We have decided after much contemplation to go ahead and continue a tiered approach to those contributions. And while there is some variance in the amount of contribution, you'll see when we move to the next slide specifically why that is, because our goal in this process was to offset any increase in cost to our employees and ensure that we provide those comparable plan and plan rates, as we have said all along has been a goal for us. And so this is the listing of those 4 different plans that will be available. In the far right column will be the cost to the employee based on which plan they select. So 4 plans, 4 options within each plan. We've got 16 different possible choices for our employees depending on their individualized needs. So how does that compare to what we have in place now? Well, the left and top side of the chart is what you just saw in terms of those 4 TASB TML plans that we are bringing on board. And then we've got a comparison on the right. So we've duplicated provided the plan for 1,500 at the bottom to get that Baylor, Scott, and White comparison. And so what you'll see is in those right two columns, the employee cost currently for the comparable plan in 21-22, and then a calculation of the difference between what an employee would be paying now versus what they would be paying next year. So you can see right away if an employee is on that copay 1,500 gold standard plan, they're going to see a substantial savings relative to what they are currently paying within TRS Active Care. Again, that's a very small number of employees that are currently on those plans. Then we've got the high deductible plan with basically a net no change if an employee only was to select that same plan, and going further down the 1,500 and then the 2,500. And so we are very pleased to share with you all that across the board, out of those 16 different possibilities, there are only 2 options that would be an increase over the current plan year. Additionally, if an employee were to elect to move to a different plan, they could certainly realize a savings if they would like to change that level of out-of-pocket max that they are selecting. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about the timeline because we've been moving very quickly over the last week to prepare for the rollout of this process. Typically, our open enrollment does not begin until July, and we would not even know our rates at this point, much less detail regarding the various plans that we have available for our employees. And so we are very glad to be able to share that information will be coming out within the next week. It will include not only detailed information about the 4 plans that we have reviewed this evening, but also the cost. We'll be updating our website, of course, with this information, sending out emails, putting up flyers, posters, having direct conversations with those supervisors of individuals who don't regularly use email as part of their day-to-day work with the district. And then we'll be receiving support from our consultant, Gallagher, who you all met at the last board meeting, along with TML, TASB Health, on really making sure that everyone has all of the information that they need to understand these plans. We'll be doing a comprehensive training with our HR staff so that we become very, very knowledgeable about the plans, as well as hosting orientation meetings for our employees where anybody can come or join in online or watch after the fact at their own time about what exactly is involved in each of the plans, how they can determine information regarding whether their current providers are available within different networks if they're interested in HMO versus PPO. And then ultimately the online open enrollment process should be very smooth because we'll be using the same exact platform that we were using previously with FF Enroll. And we'll actually begin that open enrollment process earlier than we have this summer because we want to just really make sure that everyone understands there will be no carry forward of the existing plan you have. You will have to select a plan in order to have coverage. And so the first period will begin on June 20 through July 25. We're going to try to get as many of our employees enrolled as we possibly can during that time because in order to receive that insurance card in the mail in your hand by September 1, we'll need you to be enrolled by July 25. Now, we are very aware that many of our employees are not on contract yet in July 25. So we have worked with our representatives and our consultant to establish a secondary window of open enrollment so that no one will experience a lapse in coverage. Many of our employees return on August 10th. And so that will give us 3 days to do that very final push of anybody that we haven't been able to connect with to ensure that they will have coverage on September 1, but they would actually have a virtual card available, not a paper card by the September 1 date. And last, but certainly not least, just as a final reminder, these plans will be effective on September 1. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I think it's brilliant, both in identifying this as a cost savings and being able to give that relief in the current environment that we have.
Yes, we were very, very glad. That was a primary goal in this process, was a cost savings. And, overall, in terms of the contributions that we're making, that is coming out exactly the same for the district as a whole. So the district is not realizing savings, but we're glad to pass that along to our employees.
And Mr. Decker, we did it without infusing $700 million worth of federal relief funds to sustain rates. Just,
On the record, that would be
I'm
terrorist.
just, it's a good temporary fix.
I mean, no, I agree, it's wonderful, and I think it'll be actually interesting to see maybe after the enrollment, how much total money has been saved by our employees. There's some big numbers there potentially on some of those plans, so thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that will bring us to item 4, consideration and discussion related to leadership development and the district's partnership with the Holdsworth Center. Mr. Martineau.
Just an update with our continued work with the Holdsworth Center. We have Mr. Mann, our Director of Instruction and Leadership Development. So Mr. Mann's going to provide us the ongoing work update with Holdsworth Center and CSISD.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. My pleasure to come to you tonight to share with you some of the fun things that we've been able to work on this past year, really. So if you recall from previous presentations, I've shared this timeline with you, and you can see there that we've been going through a pretty iterative process with Holdsworth. And so what I'm going to do over the next couple of minutes is just talk through what this process has looked like and how we've engaged different stakeholders as a part of our task force to gather their feedback and input. And then at the end, I'll show you where we are with our leadership definition. So we first met in the late fall, and you can see that we brought together a group of stakeholders from across the district. You can also see that my facial hair is going to change as the photos go along. But we have a variety of people that came into the room. We had teachers, we had administrators, we had librarians, we had stakeholders from different levels. We even had some students as a part of the work. So it was really good. And so we came together with them, and this is really what drove our work, is how do we define leadership in College Station ISD, and what are the leadership expectations of all staff throughout our district? One of the things that I talk about whenever I work with different folks in our leadership development programs is that everyone is a leader. You lead from the role that you're in because you are in front of kids every day, or you're in front of other adults in the building every day. So leadership is not a position, right? It's action. And so that's what we talk about. But what do we want to see in our leadership so that we can help grow our people in that? And so this is a big philosophy of Holdsworth. And so this is what they call their Holdsworth House, and it's built upon the culture of the district. And Holdsworth is very upfront. They will let us know, like, we can't do anything about your district culture. That is you guys. You have to get that straight if this work is going to be where it needs to be, and we're in a very good position with that. But right on top of the district culture is that leadership definition. And so that serves as that basis of everything that we do to grow our people. And so you can see as it goes up, we will use this definition in how we identify our people for leadership roles, how we develop those people to prepare them, how we're going to place them in particular positions that's a good fit for them and a good fit for wherever they're going to be placed, and then how we support them once they get into that position. And so it's this ongoing support that's in the process. And ultimately, the reason for all of this work is to increase our outcomes for all of our students. And so that's kind of the roof of the Holdsworth House. And so we've been going through this, and I shared this visual with you before. It's very busy, but this is one of the driving visuals that they have provided for us. This is HEB's leadership definition. And so they taught us through this process with HEB and with several other corporations and school districts from across the nation to help us kind of see where this work is going. And so in this work, they spelled it out for us and using the principal role as the main area of focus. How does someone progress from a teacher through a teacher leader to assistant principal to principal in our systems? And they helped us to understand the role of the leadership definition in that work and how this is going to help us strengthen and grow our people with where they are. So we took this information and we used a lot of research provided to us by Holdsworth, and we processed this with our task force, and then we put them to work, and we asked them to give us all the different things that they think are important for us to have, okay, so competencies. And so we took that and, on that link, and I've shared with in previous transmittals, I mean, there's lots of work that went into this and lots of input and feedback from them. And we took all that information, we went back to Holdsworth, and then we came out of the 3-day session there with a first draft of categories and competencies. And so right here in front of you is that first iteration of it. We brought it back to the task force. We're in February out at the Transportation Center. And we got their feedback. We got their input, and we said, tell us what you like. Tell us what resonates. Tell us what needs to improve. Tell us what needs to be gone. Right? And so this is just an example of some of the edits and changes that came out of working with these folks and taking their input and taking their feedback. And so we had lots of group work, lots of discussion. For those of you that were a part of the strategic design process, it's very similar to that in that there was lots of back and forths and what does this really mean kind of work and conversations, but it was really beneficial. Another task that was provided to us by Holdsworth was we needed to come up with a logo, and so it was very entertaining whenever people started pulling out their napkins and their scratch paper and started writing out different possible logos of what this could look like. And so these are just a couple of examples of the two ideas that were brought forth by the task force for further development and consideration. And they both were utilizing the competencies that have been created by the group. And so I just wanted to share that just to show like this was the first step of the process of a bunch of folks who draw stick figures more than anything else, right? We took this work, we went back to Holdsworth, and so then we started to develop a final draft for feedback. And so as we took this, we came back in March with our task force, and so this was our final meeting with them, and you can see them all assembled here in this room. And so with the final draft, we again gathered more feedback from them. We talked with them about what Holdsworth recommended that we cut and what we replace and the rationale behind it, what do we add, and really developed a full group consensus around this work. And so it was a lot of positive energy that was in the room at the end of our third session together. And we all agreed that we probably could wordsmith this for many more meetings if we really so chose to. But we were to the point where it's time for us to put this work into action and know that we're going to make adjustments in the coming years. I mean, and even HEB had told us that they're in year 7 or 8 of this work, and they've made major adjustments over time. And so that's kind of where we are. We're to a point where we're ready to get it going, and we're very excited about it. And so with the next steps in our work, I want you to open the color folders that should be on the top right corner so that you can see a little bit more clear depiction. But this is currently where we are in our leadership definition. And I'm certainly not going to read these to you, but you've got your copies there for you. And I want to point out that the logo that's on the left side was actually created by graphic design students at our high school level, because as adults, we were kind of in our own way. And you saw the drawings, like they weren't that great. They were okay.
Much better than you guys.
Absolutely. We know well enough if we have a problem, let's go talk to the kids and they can probably help us figure it out. And so they've done a fantastic job with taking the things that we needed in the logo and then put together something that was very reflective of this work. And so we are extremely excited about what we have. And if you're wondering where does this fit in our strategic design, this fits firmly in 1.2. Yeah, right. It fits very firmly in 1.2. And for me, I'm extremely excited about the work we're going to be doing with this and helping craft what people want to do and grow in their professional goals. And this work is going to help us because it's not just about people that have a leadership title. This is going to help people that are aspiring to be a leader in CSISD. Tomorrow morning, we have a planned meeting with our strategic design team out at the Transportation Center. And so we're going to come together, and this is going to be a part of what they're going to do. We're going to lay this out with them, so they'll receive copies of what you have in front of you, and we're going to show them, this is what we have currently in our strategic plan that describes leadership. And it's not that it's bad, it's that we have something that's more robust, more defined, more specific. And we're going to get their input and their feedback and see if they are willing as a group to support us replacing the profile of a leader in with the leadership definition so that we can use this to help guide and drive our work with growing our people. And then the next steps after that, and we've kind of been in this process already. We've been working with our campus leaderships and developing their understanding around this. But really and truly, this summer is where the heavy lifting of this work is going to begin. Holdsworth, they helped us understand in our last session with them that if we want to see this work become ingrained, we have to start slow, and we have to start with our people that are driving the decisions at the campus every day, and that's our principals and our principal supervisors. And so we really are going to take time to develop their understanding around these competencies and around these descriptors and what does this really look like. And then once we get their understanding throughout the summer and into the early fall, then we're going to begin the work with our assistant principals. Goal setting meetings will include these types of things, and then the work will begin to filter into the different levels of teacher leadership. And so this is going to be, again, an iterative process. We're going to bring the committee, the task force back together periodically, get their input. We're going to have input from administrators. We're going to start to develop some pieces that's going to help us put some things into action, and then we'll adjust as we learn and go through it. And ultimately, if you remember back to the first time I presented with you guys, Holdsworth talks with us about growing that pipeline. And so they use for us the example of the principal. And really, where districts often go wrong is they're not paying attention to the turns in the pipeline. They're not preparing people for their next step. And so that's where we're going to put a lot of our work and our effort, is identifying the right people and then helping prepare them for that position. We all know that college only teach you so much. And so there's certain things that you just have to learn while you're in the job and doing the job. And so we're going to put a lot of job embedded experiences in for our folks and see how they do and then help us grow our people. And this isn't just going to apply to the principalship. We are going to use this in our other levels of leadership. But for the work that we're doing with Holdsworth, we have to start somewhere, and we know the importance of campus administration. And so we're definitely keeping our eye there, but we are expanding this work as much as we can expand it that the system will be able to handle. So it's going to be a few-year process, but it's good. I'm excited about it. So with that, I will see if there are any questions or comments that you'd like to throw out my way.
I have a quick, could you go back to the house model?
Yeah.
And your get out free jail card is, I'd have to ask Holdsworth why. The linguist in me will put my taxpayer funded education to.
There we go.
Yep. Why is equitable co-equal or different than excellent? Because I would argue that equitable is not our goal. We want excellence for all students. Equitable is say that a student that's not engaged and doesn't put in the effort doesn't get a good outcome. And I want our teachers and our leaders to engage those students that aren't engaged so that everyone gets excellent. So is there a difference, and why is excellent and equitable two different words?
Yeah, I think that's a great question to ask
Holdsworth.
them. Yeah, I mean, this is lifted straight off of their stuff. So, but I do understand your point. Yeah, absolutely.
Quick question and comment. Are you guys still going to be meeting with Holdsworth, or are you kind of now, you're on
Yes,
your
ma'am.
own?
No. We are kind of completed the first semester, so to speak, the first year. We have about 8 months left with them. And so we will pick back up at the end of July. And we will go through, and I believe we have 4 or 5 meetings next year.
Awesome.
And the work that we're going to be digging in with them next year is under the identification pillar. Because we, as a core team of 3, Ms. Parkerson, Dr. Perry, and myself, all agree that if we do not identify the right people, the other work is important, but it's not going to help us reach the ultimate goal. And so that's where we're starting.
That sounds fabulous. And by the way, I was looking at the portrait of the leader and portrait of a educator, right? So I love that what you're going to be proposing tomorrow, that you guys just dug into it in more detail.
Right.
You know, to just add and grow this. This is okay if this changes, is what I think.
Yeah, our work with Holdsworth as far as attending their sessions and being on campus and that type of thing, I think wraps up around February, March of '23.
I guess for both Ms. Martindale, does the Holdsworth, how many other schools are doing this? Back to the discussion of like versus like, and then does this allow for participants in the program to kind of collaborate with people in other districts, kind of?
That's exactly what occurs.
The iron sharpens.
So I think there's a dozen to 13 in the
14.
leadership, 14 in the leadership collaborative with the three of them. In the superintendent's collaborative that I'm a part of, there's a dozen of us. Some of those districts overlap, some do not. I know in the leadership collaborative group with Jeff and Tiffany and Molly, folks such as Eanes, Corpus Christi, Tomball, those are just folks off the top of my head. Of course, there's Temple
Yes.
with myself, Klein, Conroe, Lamar Consolidated. Those are just some of examples. So there's one or two that are the same. If the superintendent of that particular district is in the superintendent collaborative, then they do not participate in the leadership collaborative. If the superintendent's not in that, they're part of the collaborative team.
And I really like, and I like to trademark the phrase, the Barclay paradox, because you're a role model, whether you want to be or not. I think for non-student facing, I think people need, that's great for the organization to realize that you are affecting beyond just your organization, your immediate organization.
Yeah, I agree.
Remind me, you guys had to apply for this?
Correct. We did. And we feel that a reason that we were able to get in this year, we had a lot of the components together. We just needed someone that's done this work because they've been doing this with other districts they have a 5-year program. And I feel that they saw we are there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we were excited that they saw what we were trying to get done.
Yeah, what we're doing, the 18-month is new. They had previously, and they still run a 5-year collaborative.
And they remind us, like, we're doing things in 18 months that they have done over 4 and 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
As someone who teaches ethical leadership courses, I want to commend you guys for what you're doing because it's hard, right? And a little bit of what you're talking about, Blaine, I think is part of that making it equitable is actually, there's a million ways to do leadership, right? I mean, there's a million different books. There's no one way to do it, but I think if you guys make it tangible like you're doing and you set your parameters and you set your definitions and you can, a lot of people call it soft skills. To me, it's hard skills. I can make you an accountant, an engineer, a teacher, but it's much harder to make you an effective leader, an ethical one at that. The one thing that I hope is happening for that pipeline that you guys are looking for is identifying those who don't identify themselves.
Yes.
Because I think we have a lot of teachers who do not beat their chests, that don't necessarily stand out for different reasons, but are excellent at what they do and have tremendous potential, maybe just don't identify it themselves. So I hope that's happening.
Yes, it is. You are correct. We have those conversations
Yeah,
frequently.
we had discussed that, Darren, that there are a number that simply don't recognize themselves accordingly. And so I think that's part of our responsibility. And Jeff's done a wonderful job leading up our different leadership components. And I know something that he's working on is making sure that visiting with principals too, to identify those people that maybe don't perceive themselves in that manner, that are high potential.
Yeah, and I hope their peers too, because as they work together, those are who see it day to day,
Yes.
when sometimes you don't interact with your principal nearly as much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mann.
You bet.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And that will adjourn us.